My voice barely rose above a whisper, but the weight of those words echoed through the mahogany-paneled room like a slap across the face. The attorney cleared his throat awkwardly. Yes, Olivia. Your father's final will. It does not include your name. I looked around. There were 7 of us seated in that room. His second wife Diane, her son Bryce, my 2 stepsisters, my cousin Hank, and my father's longtime business partner, Walter. Everyone had been mentioned. Everyone had gotten something: cash, cars, stocks, even property. Everyone except me. I wasn't shocked because I cared about the money. I was shocked because it meant he had erased me. Officially. Legally. Intentionally. I'm sorry you had to hear it like this, Diane muttered without even looking at me, her thin fingers adjusting her diamond bracelet. It's what he wanted. No one else said a word. Not even Walter, who had known me since I was 5. Not even Bryce, who once drunkenly cried to me about how he didn't feel like part of the family. I had defended him that night. I had told him, "You're just as much his son as I am his daughter." The irony. I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, frozen. My father was dead, and in his final act, he had left me with nothing, not even a kind word. I got up slowly, the chair scraping softly against the carpet. "Thank you for letting me know," I said quietly and walked out. It wasn't until I reached the elevator that my chest began to rise and fall too fast. The metallic doors slid closed, and I pressed the button to the lobby like a robot. My eyes blurred. My throat clenched, but the tears still wouldn't fall. I stood there, fists clenched, repeating in my head, "Why? What did I do to deserve this?" When the elevator opened, a young woman stepped in, and we locked eyes for a second. She gave me a small smile. I couldn't even return it. I stepped outside into the New York chill, the air sharp against my skin. It was the middle of January. The wind sliced through my coat like knives. But it didn't compare to the chill that had settled inside my chest. I had flown in from San Francisco for this, my father's funeral and the reading of his will. The funeral was cold, stiff, and eerily polite. But this was a betrayal that hit like a car crash. Back at the hotel, I opened my laptop to check my email. Anything to distract myself. But I couldn't stop hearing it. That voice in my head. "You don't belong. You're not one of us. You were never the real daughter." I remembered his voice from years ago. "You're the strong one, Olivia. You don't need help. You'll make it on your own." Had that been love or an early warning? The next morning, I went to the cafe near Central Park where he used to take me as a child. A quiet corner table by the window. I ordered the same thing I always did back then: cinnamon toast and black coffee. And as I stared out the window, watching people live their lives, I whispered to myself, "He's gone and he took everything with him. But maybe that's the beginning." I flew back to San Francisco the next day. My apartment felt smaller somehow, as if grief had expanded the space inside my chest. I sat on my bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do now. I hadn't expected millions, but I'd expected something. An acknowledgement. A letter. A small property. Even a framed photo. Anything to say, "You mattered to me." But I got nothing. Not even closure. I told no one. Not my best friend Ava, not my coworker Raymond, not even my therapist. I didn't know how to say it out loud. My father died, and he left me nothing. Not by accident, but by choice. I started searching for reasons. Was it Diane? Did she convince him I was ungrateful? Was it Bryce? Did he lie about something I said? Was it me? Had I been too cold, too distant, too independent? Had I loved him the wrong way? I went to work the next Monday and smiled like nothing had happened. No one noticed the way my fingers trembled when I typed. No one noticed that my lunch sat untouched, or that I checked my phone for messages from a man who would never message me again. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't from the attorney. It was from Diane. "Olivia, I know this must be hard for you, but I hope with time, you'll understand. Your father made decisions that were painful, yes, but also necessary. He believed you were strong enough to make your own way. Let this be your motivation. Motivation? He stripped me of my name, my place, my inheritance, and called it motivation? I tore the letter in half. And that was the last time I looked back. Growing up in the Carter household was like living in a museum. Quiet, polished, and full of things you couldn't touch. My mother, Elizabeth, passed away when I was 7. I barely remember her voice, but I remember her hands, soft, always warm, always busy braiding my hair or helping me pick out shoes for school. After she died, it felt like the color was drained from our house. My father stopped laughing. The lights were dimmer. The air was colder. When he married Diane 2 years later, I was too young to understand what was happening, just that someone new had taken over the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom where my mother's perfume still lingered on the pillowcases. Diane came with 2 children, Bryce and Clara. Overnight, I went from being an only child to being the half-sibling. The other one. The one people forgot to introduce at events. At school award nights, Diane clapped loudest for Bryce, even when I was the one on stage. At birthdays, Bryce got the newest gaming consoles. I got books. You love reading, my father said. It's good for you. It wasn't just the gifts. It was the attention. The way Diane would touch Bryce's shoulder at dinner and say, "How was your day, sweetheart?" and turn to me only when it was my turn to pass the salt. It was the way Bryce got the guest room with the big window, and I was moved to the room near the laundry where the dryer rattled all night. At first, I tried harder. I stayed late at school, joined student council, won essay contests, got straight A's. I cleaned the kitchen without being asked. I memorized Diane's coffee order. I helped Bryce with math homework, even though he rolled his eyes and called me Miss Harvard. But nothing I did was enough. At my high school graduation, my father smiled for pictures, but the flowers went to Clara, who hadn't even graduated that year. She was feeling left out, Diane had said with a shrug. I remember the night I got my first college acceptance letter, Stanford. I ran into the kitchen, waving the email on my phone, heart pounding. My father looked up from his newspaper, blinked, and said, "Wow, that's impressive. Pricey, though." Diane didn't even look up. "Will there be scholarships?" I nodded, trying to ignore the sting in my throat. "Yeah, I think I'll qualify." "Good," she said, stirring her tea, "because Bryce is going to need help with his tuition soon, too." I paid for Stanford almost entirely on my own, merit scholarships, part-time work, student loans. Every time I came home, I brought little gifts. A framed photo, a scarf for Diane, a new tie for Dad. They stayed in their boxes. Still, I kept showing up. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. Even when my name wasn't on the gift tags, I smiled and poured wine. Because I believed, stupidly, that loyalty mattered. That love meant showing up, even if no one clapped for you. One night during my second year of college, I got a call. Dad had chest pains. I flew back overnight. Diane looked at me when I arrived and said, "You didn't have to come. He's fine." But when I walked into his hospital room, he smiled for the first time in weeks. "Live," he whispered, squeezing my hand. I stayed 4 days. Took notes during doctor rounds. Made sure the nurses didn't forget his heart meds. Diane came in twice. Bryce came once, just to take a picture for Instagram. When he was discharged, Dad patted my shoulder and said, "You're really something, you know that?" It was the most affection he'd shown in years. But even that faded. Months later, he forgot my birthday. Again. When I got my first job offer, a startup in San Francisco, I called home excitedly. "That's great," he said. "Clara's thinking about moving to LA too." Of course she was. When I bought my first car, I emailed photos. No reply. When I broke my arm in a cycling accident and was out of work for 3 weeks, Diane sent a 2-line message. "Hope you recover soon. Try not to overdo it." Still, I kept showing up. Every Christmas. Every Father's Day. Every family barbecue. One summer, I helped Diane organize their anniversary party, catered food, handmade invitations, a slideshow of their old photos. She stood up that night in front of everyone and said, I'm so lucky to have a family that supports me in everything, especially my children. She didn't look at me once. Even then, I told myself it didn't matter. That maybe some people just couldn't express affection. That one day my efforts would pay off in respect, in love, maybe even in the will. Not because I wanted the money, but because I wanted proof that I wasn't invisible. And then came that day in the attorney's office. The moment that shattered the lie I had told myself all my life. That if I was good enough, I would be chosen. I never was. The days following the will reading blurred together like smeared ink on a tear-stained page. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. I walked the streets of Manhattan for hours, the city pulsing around me like it didn't notice the funeral that had just ended, the daughter who had just been erased. Back at the airport, my carry-on felt heavier than usual. Not because of weight, but because of what I carried home. Silence, humiliation, and a hollow space where a father's love used to live. Ava picked me up from the airport. "You look wrecked," she said softly. "Was it that bad?" I nodded, avoiding her eyes. "You don't want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not yet." I didn't know how to explain it. How do you explain being unloved? How do you explain sitting in a room where your name was never spoken, not even as an afterthought? I thought maybe someone would reach out in the days after. Walter, Clara, even Bryce. But no one did. A week later, I got a message from Bryce. Not a call, just a message. "Hey. Just wanted to say, I hope there's no hard feelings about the will stuff." It wasn't personal. It was just the way Dad planned it. Wasn't personal? Wasn't personal. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Then I turned off my phone. I went into the kitchen and stared at my fridge. On it was a photo of me and Dad from a fishing trip in Oregon years ago. I had caught the bigger fish. He was laughing in the photo, proud of me. I took it down. The next morning, Diane called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Olivia, honey, I know it's been hard. Believe me, this wasn't easy for any of us. Your father made difficult decisions. He did what he felt was best. And you know he admired your independence. That's why he knew you'd be okay, without anything. Without anything." She said it like I had just missed a concert, not an entire legacy. That weekend, I sat on my balcony with a cup of lukewarm coffee and stared into the fog that rolled over the city like a slow suffocation. Something shifted in me, not in anger, not even in grief, but in clarity. All my life, I'd been trying to be enough, enough to be loved, enough to be remembered, enough to be chosen. And even in death, he had looked past me. He saw me as capable, but never worthy. A few days later, I got a text from Clara. "Not sure what you've heard, but things have been intense lately. We're trying to keep things peaceful. Hope you are too." Peaceful? She meant quiet. She meant, don't make this a problem. She meant, don't embarrass the family by reacting. That's when it hit me. They didn't just forget me. They needed me to stay silent, stay good, stay invisible. So I did, but not in the way they expected. I began deleting contacts. Walter, gone. Clara, gone. Bryce, gone. Diane, blocked. I didn't post anything. I didn't announce anything. I didn't share cryptic quotes or bitter songs. I just stepped back. The part of me that used to crave their approval felt strangely calm now. Like a door had quietly closed, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to knock on it again. At work, I poured everything into my role. Long hours. Extra shifts. I started volunteering for side projects. There was a different kind of hunger now, not for validation but for creation. Something inside me whispered, "You don't need their name. You'll build your own." And for once, I believed it. I had never been the type of woman who gave up easily. When life threw punches, I learned to weave through them with grace. But this was different. What my family had done had cut me in ways I didn't know were possible. And yet, I refused to remain broken. The morning after the confrontation with my parents, I sat at my small kitchen table, the sunlight piercing through the blinds like sharp truths I couldn't avoid. I stared at the cold cup of coffee in front of me, hands wrapped around it for comfort. My mind replayed everything they said, especially the part where they admitted knowing all along. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I had asked them, tears streaming down my face. "Because we thought it was better this way," my mother had replied, as if she believed the lie she told. Better for whom? Not for me. I was the one who lived a life built on manipulated love. I was the one who had defended them every time someone questioned their motives. I was the one who grew up believing loyalty was unconditional until I found out their loyalty wasn't even real. I needed clarity. I needed truth. So I did what I had always been good at, research. I started with my birth records. Luckily, living in Oregon, I had access to the online vital records database. What I found first was disturbing. My birth certificate had been amended. There was a note on the digital file that said, "Updated custodial information." That phrase rang loud in my ears like a siren. I had never been adopted, or so I thought. But this line suggested otherwise. I visited the local records office in person, needing answers that a screen couldn't give me. After providing my ID and filing a request, the woman at the desk handed me a manila envelope. Inside it was the truth. My biological mother's name wasn't the woman who raised me. Her name was Camille Davis. And my heart dropped. Camille Davis. That name had only been mentioned once in my childhood, and it had been in whispers. I remembered overhearing my aunt on the phone late one night when I was about 7 years old. She had said, "I just hope Camille doesn't come back into the picture." At the time, I thought Camille was some distant relative who caused drama at Thanksgiving. Now, she was the woman who gave birth to me. The woman who, for some reason, had been erased from my life. I drove back home in silence, tears staining my cheeks, questions flooding my heart. Who was Camille? Where was she now? And why had my family lied about her? That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat on the couch with my laptop, digging through every database, forum, and online thread I could find. It was like trying to find a ghost in the wind. Until I stumbled upon an article from 10 years ago. It was a small piece, almost hidden. Local artist Camille Davis exhibits abstract pieces at Portland Street Gallery. The photo attached showed a woman, tall, graceful, with auburn curls and a tired smile. She looked like me. She looked too much like me. The gallery listed a forwarding contact email. I hesitated before typing. "Hello, Camille. I know this may sound strange, but my name is Natalie Carter. I believe you might be my biological mother. I was born on February 12, 1994 in Portland. I recently discovered information that leads me to believe we are connected. Please, if this reaches you, I would just like to know the truth. With hope, Natalie." I pressed send and felt my soul leave my body. The next day was an endless fog of anxiety. Every ping of my inbox made my heart leap. And then, around 5:14 p.m., a reply came. "Dear Natalie, I've been waiting for this message for 30 years. I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to let you go. I'm here. Camille." I broke down sobbing. For the first time in my life, something finally made sense. We decided to meet the next weekend. It felt surreal, like something from a movie. I drove to a small cafe in Eugene, Oregon, neutral territory, away from both our lives. When I walked in, I saw her sitting by the window, a bouquet of daisies in her hand, my favorite. Camille stood when she saw me. We both froze. There was no need for words at first. Just tears. Just that electric, sacred silence between souls who once shared one heartbeat. She hugged me like she had waited a lifetime for it. Because she had. She didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. "I was 17 when I had you," she began. "My parents didn't want me to raise a child. They arranged for your father's sister, your Aunt Linda, to take you. I was told it would just be until I finished college." I blinked, unsure of how to even process that. "But they never gave you back. They lied to me, told me you were doing better without me. And I didn't have the resources to fight them legally. Every attempt I made to contact you, they blocked me. They changed your last name. Your mother, she forged documents. I was erased." Her voice cracked, and I held her trembling hands. All those years, I thought my parents were protecting me. All those years, I thought I was chosen, loved, wanted. Instead, I had been part of someone's plan. A plan to keep secrets buried beneath good schools, family vacations, and forced smiles in photo albums. The next few weeks were a journey I hadn't expected. Camille and I spent time together, and each day, a new layer of understanding unfolded. We painted together. She still had that artistic spark. And surprisingly, I did too. It had always been inside me, unexplained, but now it had a name, a source. But with every joyful discovery, I carried pain. Pain for the childhood I missed with her. Pain for the lies I believed. Pain for the loyalty I gave to those who didn't deserve it. And yet, I refused to become bitter. I met with my family again, this time with Camille beside me. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother, no, Linda, looked at Camille like she'd seen a ghost. My father stayed quiet, his face pale. You had no right, I said, my voice calm but firm. No right to steal my identity. No right to decide what was best for me without giving me a choice. Linda looked at me with tears in her eyes. We loved you like our own. But I wasn't yours, I replied. And loving me doesn't justify lying to me. Camille stood strong. I would have done anything to keep her. You know that. They didn't argue. They couldn't. Because the truth was finally out. And truth, when spoken aloud, is louder than any excuse. I changed my name back to Natalie Davis. Not to erase the years I lived under a lie, but to reclaim the life that was stolen from me. I didn't cut everyone off completely. I'm not built that way. But I did create distance. Healthy, necessary distance. And in that space, something beautiful happened. I found myself. Not the version of me who lived to please others. Not the version who accepted less than she deserved. But the real me. The one Camille always believed I could be. We now host art classes together for foster youth. It's our way of giving back, of breaking cycles. We teach them to express their truth, to speak their pain, to believe in the power of their voice. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Lies can build a cage. But truth? Truth sets you free. When the last piece of the truth fell into place, it wasn't fireworks or a dramatic gasp that followed. It was silence. A deep, echoing silence that wrapped around Olivia as she sat alone in her apartment, holding the printed text messages in one hand and the photo of her mother in the other. All these years, she had believed the story told to her, that her father left, that he didn't want a family, that her mother had suffered alone. She remembered the tearful glances exchanged between aunts and uncles during family dinners, the forced sympathy, the fake concern. But it was all a performance. The truth? Her mother had pushed him away. She had told everyone a different version of the story so many times that even she began to believe it. And now Olivia had proof, letters from her father she had never received, bank statements showing he continued sending support for years after he was supposedly gone, and the voicemail, the one she accidentally found on an old phone in her aunt's attic. His voice cracked through the static. Olivia, if you ever find this, please know I never left you. I tried. I begged to be there. They just wouldn't let me. She couldn't stop shaking. It felt like a layer of her life had been peeled back to reveal a gaping wound that had been bleeding under the surface all along. Why would her own mother lie to her? Why would her family help cover it up? Suddenly, Olivia remembered the last conversation she had with her cousin Rachel, months ago, where Rachel had nearly said something before catching herself. The pause, the forced smile, it made sense now. She grabbed her keys and left the apartment. She had to confront them. The house smelled the same, lemon-scented cleaner and old furniture. Her aunt, Maria, opened the door with a confused smile. Olivia? Are you okay? No, Olivia said, her voice firm. I'm not. Maria's face fell. She opened the door wider. Come in, sweetheart. Inside, Olivia laid the printed emails, letters, and voicemail transcript on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. I found this. I know everything now, she said, her voice trembling but strong. Maria sat down slowly, her eyes wide. Why did you lie to me? Why did everyone pretend like he disappeared? He didn't leave me. He didn't abandon me. Maria closed her eyes, as if years of guilt pressed suddenly onto her chest. Your mother, she was hurt. She was stubborn. And she couldn't handle being wrong. So she made us all go along with it. She made you lie to me about my father. She was afraid, Maria whispered. Afraid that if you found out, you'd choose him. That you'd leave her. The absurdity of it all hit Olivia like a wave. She chose to lie. For years. Do you understand what that did to me? Tears brimmed in Maria's eyes. I do. I know. We were wrong. Wrong? That word felt far too small. Later that evening, Olivia sat alone in her car in front of the house she never thought she'd find, her father's. It took only a few searches. He hadn't moved far, not really. He lived a couple of towns away in a quiet neighborhood. She sat there for what felt like an hour. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door handle. She wasn't sure what she'd find. A new family? A cold rejection? But she needed answers. She needed him to know that she knew. She walked up the path slowly, her heart pounding, each step heavier than the last. When she finally knocked, it felt like time had stopped. The door opened. A man stood there, older than she remembered from the photos, but his eyes. Olivia, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her throat tightened. Yes, it's me. He stepped outside. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he pulled her into a hug so deep, so familiar, she almost fell apart in his arms. You found me, he whispered, as tears streamed down both their cheeks. I'm sorry it took so long, she said. He pulled back and looked into her eyes. It's not your fault. None of this was your fault. And in that moment, Olivia felt something she hadn't in years. Peace. Back home, her phone rang. It was her mother. Olivia stared at the screen, heart torn. She answered. I heard you found him, her mother said, voice shaky. I did. A pause. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did. I know, her mother whispered. I need time, Olivia said. I'm not ready to forgive. Not yet. That's fair. And she hung up. For once, she was in control of the story. As the days passed, things only grew stranger. One morning, Scarlett received a package at her doorstep. There was no return address. Cautiously, she opened it. Inside was a small velvet box, and nestled within it was a gold necklace, the same one her grandmother had worn every day before she died. Scarlett's breath caught in her chest. She had buried that necklace with her grandmother. Her hands trembled. There was a note folded beneath it. In neat handwriting, it read, Some things don't stay buried. And secrets? They always float back up. Scarlett dropped the necklace and stumbled back. Her heart pounded. She stared at the jewelry, unsure whether to scream, cry, or run. She called the cemetery, demanding to know if her grandmother's grave had been disturbed. They checked and confirmed that it hadn't. Everything was untouched. So how did the necklace find its way to her doorstep? The next day, a white envelope was slipped under her door. No stamp, no name, just her first name, handwritten, Scarlett. Inside was a single photograph. Faded and worn, it showed a young woman, her grandmother, standing with a group of people in front of a strange building. On the back of the photo, another message was scrawled. She knew what they were doing, and now you're the only one left who can tell the truth. Scarlett stared at the image. Her grandmother looked younger than she'd ever seen her. But it was the people in the background that made her freeze. One of them was her Uncle Grant. Another looked like her father. But the most chilling part? A man stood behind them, tall, in a black suit, his face mostly shadowed. And yet, somehow, his presence was eerily familiar. That night, Scarlett couldn't sleep. She sat with the photo and the necklace beside her, wondering what story they were trying to tell her. And as the wind howled outside, carrying the sounds of leaves scraping against the window pane, a single thought anchored itself deep into her mind. They didn't lie just to protect themselves, they lied to protect something much bigger. And that something might still be watching me. She stood up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out the box that held all the remaining letters and journals her grandmother had left behind. She hadn't read them all, not yet. But now she would. One by one. Because if her family had buried the truth, and her grandmother had tried to pass it down, Scarlett wasn't going to run anymore. She was going to dig up every dark secret they had tried to hide. The room was silent now, as if the lies had exhausted even the walls that had heard them too many times. Tessa stood in front of the fireplace, watching the flames flicker. Hot, angry, uncontrollable, like the storm inside her heart. She felt every part of herself cracking, collapsing under the truth that had surfaced. Her entire life had been shaped by falsehoods, carefully disguised as love, as protection, as family. Her hands trembled, but her heart was strong. She wasn't going to break, not anymore. She stepped out of the house that had betrayed her and walked back to the apartment she now called her own. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. She opened the door, took a deep breath, and finally exhaled decades of deception. She wasn't sure what came next, but she knew it would be real. And that mattered more than anything. 3 weeks passed. Tessa didn't return to her parents' house. She didn't answer calls from Diane. She ignored the long string of text messages from cousins who suddenly wanted to check on her. She had spent too long making excuses for people who didn't deserve her loyalty. Now, she was silent. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the discomfort of her absence. She focused on rebuilding. Tessa started therapy. For the first time, she told someone everything. Every moment she had swallowed pain. Every time she questioned her sanity when the gaslighting became too thick to see through. She cried. She screamed. She healed one truth at a time. And then one day, something extraordinary happened. She received a handwritten letter from her younger cousin, Emily. Dear Tessa, I don't know if this letter will reach you, but I hope it does. I want you to know that I saw what happened. I heard things over the years, and I always felt something wasn't right. How your voice was often shut down at family dinners, how you were always blamed when anything went wrong. I was too young to say anything then. But I'm older now, and I want you to know that I believe you. I see you, and I'm sorry I stayed quiet. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Love. Emily. Tears welled up in Tessa's eyes, not because she was sad, but because for the first time, someone had seen her truth and accepted it without resistance. It felt like a sunrise inside her chest. Later that month, Tessa found herself at a quiet park bench with Emily, watching the ducks glide over the water. Emily looked nervous. I was scared to reach out. Everyone kept saying you were going through a phase. But I knew better. Tessa smiled gently. You did more than enough. You believed me. That's more than most of them did. They sat in silence for a while, just soaking in the peaceful quiet. It was strange but comforting. For the first time in years, Tessa wasn't alone in her truth. She had a witness. And that was powerful. One evening, after a particularly calm day, Tessa stood in front of her bathroom mirror. Her reflection looked back at her, eyes clear, posture strong. She didn't look like someone broken by betrayal. She looked like someone forged through fire. There was a knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Opening it, she was surprised to see her father, Richard. He looked older. Not just in years, but in weight, the kind of weight lies put on your soul. He stood there for a long while before speaking. Can I come in? Tessa didn't move. Why? Richard's eyes dropped. Because I want to say what I should have said years ago. I want to tell you the truth. She hesitated. But then slowly, she stepped aside. Richard didn't sit. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, fidgeting with his wedding ring. I knew, he said finally. Knew what? Tessa's voice was flat. All of it. About Diane. About the way she manipulated things. I saw how she treated you, how she always favored others, twisted things, kept secrets. Tessa stared at him. And you said nothing. I didn't know how to stop her. She controlled the house. Controlled me, too. That's not an excuse, she said sharply. You were my father. You were supposed to protect me. He nodded. I know. And I failed you. I stayed silent because it was easier than facing the storm. But now I live with the regret every single day. He took a deep breath. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear it from me. You were right. You've always been right. And I'm sorry. Tessa didn't speak for a long time. She looked at the man she once adored, now just a tired figure trying to find redemption in a room full of ghosts. Finally, she whispered, Thank you for telling me, but I'm not ready to heal with you. Not yet. He nodded again, quietly. I understand. And then he left. It wasn't closure, but it was something. Days passed. Tessa began journaling every day. She wrote about her pain, her memories, her resilience. Page by page, she reclaimed her voice. It was messy. It was emotional. But it was hers. She even started a blog, anonymously sharing parts of her journey. To her surprise, people began reading,
commenting,
sharing their own stories. Women from across the country told her how they too had been lied to, gaslit, silenced by their own families. Tessa had unknowingly created a safe space, a small corner of the internet where people could be raw and honest. She named it the Truth Room. One morning, while checking emails, she got a message from a publisher. They wanted to talk about turning her blog into a book. Tessa was stunned. She never imagined her pain could become something powerful, something that helped others. But here she was. She took the meeting, signed the contract, and began writing her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. 6 months later, the book was released. My Family Lied, a daughter's story of truth and triumph. It climbed bestseller lists within weeks. But for Tessa, the real success wasn't in the charts. It was in the emails from strangers who said her story saved them, that her truth gave them the courage to speak theirs. Her family? Most of them went silent. Some were furious, others embarrassed. A few tried to reach out too little too late. But Tessa had found peace. She didn't need their validation anymore. She had her own. 1 year later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Tessa stood at the podium of a women's conference. Hundreds of faces stared back at her, some smiling, some teary-eyed, some just wide-eyed with recognition. She took a deep breath. And then she said, I was lied to, repeatedly, by the people I trusted the most. But I survived. And more than that, I transformed. If you're sitting here today wondering if your pain is real, if your voice matters, if your truth deserves space, I'm here to tell you, yes. Yes. And absolutely yes. Don't let anyone shrink your story. Don't let their silence suffocate your truth.
Speak, write, heal,
rebuild. Because you are not what they did to you. You are who you choose to become after. The room erupted in applause. That night, back in her hotel room, Tessa looked out at the city skyline. Lights twinkled like tiny stars, as if the universe itself was applauding her courage. She smiled. She had started in a house full of lies, confused, broken, silenced.
And now
she was a lighthouse, guiding others home to themselves. I stared at the ceiling that night, the room dim with the soft yellow light from the street lamp leaking through the blinds. My body was still, but my mind was racing in every direction. I kept going back to that moment, the look on my mother's face when I asked her why, the way her lips trembled, how her eyes darted around as if searching for something to hold on to before she spoke. I didn't get closure. I got silence. I got tears. And in a twisted way, I got more questions than answers. I never imagined that the people who were supposed to raise me, protect me, guide me, would be the ones who would leave me feeling so hollow. And now, the ache wasn't just in my chest. It was in my bones, in the pit of my stomach, in every breath I took. There were days I felt like a stranger to myself. What do you do when everything you believed about your life turns out to be a lie? I started therapy, not because someone forced me, but because I needed someone who wouldn't flinch when I spoke the truth out loud. My family lied to me, I said during my first session, barely able to get the words out. Not just once. Over and over. And they kept smiling like nothing was wrong. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Harper, didn't say anything for a while. She just sat there, watching me carefully, like she knew I was holding back a hurricane behind my eyes. "Emily," she finally said, "can I ask, what was the biggest lie?" I took a deep breath. That we were happy. That we were normal. That I was loved for who I really was. And just like that, the dam broke. Tears flooded my face. I wasn't even crying just because of the lies. I was mourning the version of myself who once felt safe, who trusted, who believed. Over the next few weeks, therapy became a place where I could bleed out safely. I told her everything. About how my sister knew I wasn't their biological daughter before I did. About how my cousin used that knowledge to manipulate me for years. About how my father, who had once promised to take me to every father-daughter dance, suddenly became distant when I turned 13.
It all made sense now.
The way they never quite answered certain questions. The way conversations would shift every time I asked about the past. The way photos were removed from albums, or how birthdays were strangely vague. But here's the part that hurt the most. They could have told me the truth so many times. And yet they chose silence. They chose to let me build my life on fiction. That betrayal isn't just emotional. It's spiritual. It shakes your sense of self. I didn't know where I belonged anymore. Not fully in that family. Not in the world I'd known. Not even in my own reflection. Then came a letter. It was a plain white envelope, with no return address, just my name written in a shaky hand. Inside, it was a note from a woman named Marlene. She said she had known my birth mother. My heart stopped. Marlene explained that she had worked as a nurse in a small hospital outside of Seattle and remembered the day my birth mother gave me up. It was a closed adoption. No names exchanged. Just a young woman, barely 20, who cried for hours and then handed me over to someone who promised a better life. "I don't know why, but I've always thought about you," the letter said. "I hope you're okay. I hope you know she loved you very much." That sentence broke me, because it was something I had needed to hear for years. She loved me, even if she gave me away.
She loved me.
I clutched that letter for hours, rereading it over and over. It was the first thing that felt real in a long time. No lies. No carefully constructed story. Just one woman reaching out because she thought I deserved to know. I wrote back. And eventually, I found myself flying to Seattle. Marlene was waiting at the gate when I arrived, holding a small sign with my name. She was older now, gray hair pulled back, but her smile was the kind that could disarm even the most guarded soul. We sat in a quiet cafe, where she brought out a box. "She left this behind," she said, pushing it toward me. "It was supposed to go to you, but they never came back for it." Inside was a baby blanket, worn but clean, with a small pink embroidered name. Hope. I froze. She named me Hope?
She did.
Said you were her little piece of hope in a world that had broken her. I couldn't breathe. Tears spilled down my face as I held the blanket to my chest. I didn't even realize I was sobbing until Marlene reached over and gently placed her hand on mine. "She was scared, Emily," she said softly. "But she loved you more than anything." I walked by the water that evening, the breeze cool against my skin. The sky was painted in soft oranges and purples, and for the first time in months, I felt grounded. Maybe I would never know all the details. Maybe I would never get a full explanation from the people who raised me. Maybe I would never fully understand why they did what they did. But I had this truth now. My mother, my birth mother, had loved me. And that mattered. That changed everything. When I returned home, I felt different. I was still healing. Still untangling years of emotional knots. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the same way. I started talking to my family again, but this time on my terms. I set boundaries. I asked questions. I demanded honesty. Some conversations were brutal. There were more tears. More confessions. And yes, some defensiveness. Some denial. But also some apologies. My father cried when he told me he was scared to lose me if I ever found out. My mother finally admitted that she had felt insecure, like she had to pretend to be perfect or she'd lose the child she had fought so hard to raise. My sister apologized for keeping the secret and for treating me like an outsider. Not everything was fixed, but the silence was finally broken, and that in itself was healing. I began using my story to help others. I started a blog, Truth in the Cracks, where I wrote about the journey of discovering myself after betrayal, after lies, after loss. People from all over reached out. Some told me about their own adoptive stories, some about family lies. Some just said, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." I realized how many people walk around feeling lost, alone, lied to, and how powerful it is to just say, "I see you. I believe you. You're not alone." It took time, but I forgave them. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting them to suffer. I had a life to live, a future to build, love to give, and I wasn't going to let their lies define me anymore. I was Emily. I was hope. I was loved. And I was finally free. As Olivia stared out the window of her new apartment in Portland, a city so unlike the one she had left behind, she realized that the lie her family told her, no matter how deep, was not her ending. It was, in fact, her rebirth. She didn't escape the pain. She didn't numb herself to the betrayal. She faced it. She felt every ounce of the heartache, the sting of abandonment, the disillusionment of knowing that those she trusted most had chosen control over compassion. But she didn't let it harden her. Instead, she allowed it to break her open. And through the cracks, light found its way in. One morning, she stood in front of a mirror, barefaced, eyes still puffy from a night of tears, but when she looked at herself, for the first time in months, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. And that was enough. Because now Olivia wasn't just surviving. She was healing. She got a job at a small publishing house. Nothing glamorous, but it fulfilled her. Each morning, she walked to work with a cup of strong black coffee and a heart full of new dreams. She met people who didn't see her as the adopted one or the mistake they tried to hide. They saw her as Olivia, a woman with ideas, laughter, kindness, and fire. She joined a local writing group where she began putting her own story into words. Not out of vengeance, but out of liberation. Her truth deserved to be heard, even if it was just by her. One rainy Thursday, as she finished reading a chapter aloud, one of the older women in the group reached across the table, touched her hand, and whispered, "You're stronger than you think. And your story, it'll help someone." And in that moment, Olivia felt something inside her shift. That tiny flicker of worth that had nearly been crushed by her family's lies was now aflame. Weeks passed. Seasons changed. Letters from her parents remained unopened in a drawer. They'd finally confessed, too late. Too rehearsed. Too shallow. They claimed they were trying to protect her, that they were scared. But what they feared, Olivia realized, was not her truth. It was their shame. She didn't hate them, but she didn't owe them her peace either. She owed that to herself. One day, standing at a local bookstore where her writing group was hosting a reading event, she took the mic. She introduced herself not by her last name, but simply as Olivia. And she read from her piece, a story about a girl who discovered she wasn't who she thought she was, but who decided to write her own ending anyway. The room applauded, and Olivia smiled, fully this time, because in that moment, she wasn't the girl who had been lied to. She wasn't the daughter who had been betrayed. She was a woman who had risen.